Good morning, I'm Francesca Maxime. This is WiseGirl on Friday, the 28th of October. Thanks so much for joining me and for watching this morning. I spent a really terrific week here in New York City with my mom, actually, who came to visit. We had a chance to go to a few different lectures and talks, and one was on Plato and the New Republic. Another one was on racial sensitivity here in New York City and how we can learn to more fully understand one another. Another one last night was on the nature of our minds, how we are sort of not really sure how our mind is different or separate than the brain itself and the body, and how we can sort of separate our thinking and our thoughts with an integration of our whole lives. So lots of things happening in my head right now, and I won't delve into all of them. At this moment anyway. But what I wanted to share with you this morning was on presents and what presents really means. And I'm not talking about the kind you're going to buy in a month or so to send off to folks around the holidays. I mean the kind of presents that is what happens when you are with someone or with yourself in a way that is entirely attuned, entirely in the moment, and entirely aware of the fact that you are paying attention to whatever it is that is unfolding in front of you at that given point in time, or at this given point in time. One of the things that I think prohibits us from being fully present, and this is something that we can see when, for example, we're trying to have a conversation with someone and they're distracted by their phones, or their eyes are shifting, or you just feel as though they are not really paying attention to you, and you feel a little bit perhaps disrespected or not affirmed, but we know that when we are in the presence of someone who is really attuned to us, that we are able to be our most authentic selves, and that we feel heard and valued. And we all like that. It's like a warm hug. We all kind of can appreciate that. But I feel like one of the things that distracts us from being present to ourselves and others, because we often distract ourselves from ourselves because we aren't really able to sit with ourselves in the ways that would enable us to be fully present. And sometimes that means we just tune out and zone out to the TV or on the computer, or drink a lot of alcohol, or have a lot of sex, or eat a lot of food, or work really hard and be workaholics, and any number of things that we use to kind of numb ourselves. Fundamentally, underneath all of that busyness or distraction, oftentimes I feel as though is a certain amount of self-criticism that can, as Gina Sharp, a meditation teacher here in New York, said in an interview with Tracy Cochran of Parabola Magazine. She said that, part of it is because we have so much ambitions, perhaps, that we are so self-critical, we aren't able to rest in the present moment and be attuned to that and sort of take repose, as she put it, in the present moment. But why is that? She says that the idea of having self-hatred is, basically something that it's very present in our society because we're so ambitious. She cited a Harvard study that said basically that people who really had achieved a lot didn't believe it. That they really said to themselves, like, well, I must not be here. It was called the imposter study or something. And it was done a few years ago. I remember reading about it then. But I never really thought about it in the terms of being able to be fully present to ourselves and fully present to others, and what that kind of attunement or lack thereof really means, not only to our relationship with ourselves, which of course is fundamental to our relationship with others, but in fact to our relationship with others, whether or not that is a spouse, a lover, a partner, a friend, a colleague at work, or whomever in the community that we may be with. So what is the self-criticism that emerges, and what is that about? I talked in a previous WiseGirl talk about sort of the difference between guilt and shame, and there is a movement, shall I say, out there that I think is called shame resilience. And I don't know the author of that, Brene Brown. I don't really know the whole history behind where that term came from, but I question the actual title, shame resilience. It almost feels like, you would be resilient to the fact that you have shame, but that there is always shame and going to be shame. And I'd like to just say, you can eradicate shame. There is no need for shame. Shame doesn't really have a place, even though you may be feeling it. Hold it with compassion for sure, but there's actually a layer underneath it that I think that I would invite you to consider opening up to, and seeing if you can't recognize a possibility within yourself to get there, which is simply that you are perfectly good and fine exactly as you are in this present moment. And that idea of being ambitious and having control and planning and trying to achieve certain things, it leaves us always longing and wanting, whether it's a more successful job or career, more children, healthy kids, another house in the Hamptons, or whatever it may have you. This idea of pursuit is very different from this idea of being on a journey, because being on the path or a journey sort of allows you to unfold in the present moment as things are ever changing. And that is in fact what life is. Moment to moment, it is always evolving and changing. But when we within ourselves have a certain amount of self-talk that is critical, that thinks that we should be somewhere that we're not, we're unable to really incorporate our own presence. And then we end up taking in and on activities that perhaps become unskillful and unuseful, like overwork or too much food or too much drinking or any of those things that perhaps then we feel bad about. And then we feel shame about those activities. So our behavior, because we're trying to do good things, ends up making us feel worse. And then we add on an extra layer of, I'm not good enough, when in fact there was nothing wrong with us in the first place. But because we can't really quite sit with ourselves, we're not able to sort of go beyond into the place of saying, wow, I'm just feeling crappy today. That's okay. And gee, there's nothing wrong with me, but maybe I could have handled that conversation a little bit differently. So perhaps I have an opportunity there to express remorse or invite someone to forgive me. But that's very different from having a belief, a hardened thought, which is what a belief is, that there is something fundamentally wrong with me as a person, because in fact, there is not anything fundamentally wrong with you, and there never was. Sometimes we don't act with as much skill or discernment or wisdom as we might like, but that's something that we can cultivate. But the only way that we can cultivate that kind of presence is in moment to moment noticing and awareness of the changes, not only within our minds and within our awareness in terms of our situation around us and the people around us, but also within our own bodies and how we feel. Do we get a little more tense in our chest, or a little bit more sinking feeling in our gut, or different things that may happen throughout the course of a day when you're around certain kinds of people, perhaps, or when you're in certain situations? I would invite you to consider paying more attention to those natural signals that your body is bringing you in the present moment on a regular basis. And if you're in a place like New York City, where I am, there are a lot of stimuli coming at you all the time. See if you can't embrace that stimuli with almost a third eye and just sort of witness it as a phenomenon that's happening while still maintaining a certain sense of inner dignity and inner composure based on the fact that you know that there's nothing wrong with you, that you're perfectly fine. There's no need for shame. There's no need for the self-critic and the inner critic. And there's no need to spend a lot of time telling yourself that you should be other than where you are. You are where you are. Embrace that. It's a beautiful thing. Our ability to admit that we don't know and stay curious about what information we can sort of take in the present moment is often what guides us more than some master plan of having great control over, if I do this, if I do this, if I do this, then I'll get here, here, and here. Because oftentimes we achieve those things that we thought, and then we really aren't as happy as we thought we would be in the long run for a sustained period of time. So I would invite you to rest and repose in the present moment, fully aware of everything. And I'm not saying that you can't put effort towards certain things that merit it. That is also part of it. But less the focus on simply doing out of a certain amount of freneticism, and perhaps inviting a bit of doing that is more based on your own ability to rest in being exactly who you are. I'm Francesca Maxime. This is WiseGirl for Friday, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Take care.